This is the No Excuses Coaching Podcast with Ryan Montes and Alanna Banks, where we discuss the mindset, the attitude, and the strategies of elite coaching.
Alanna, I have several problems.
Problems?
Problems. In fact, I have 5 problems. 5 problems with the self-help industry, which is an article written by Mark Manson that we're going to discuss today.
Cool.
Yeah. How about that?
I'm excited about this topic.
I'm excited about lots of things.
Yeah.
Including the topic and the podcast in general. Mark Manson, he's an author. He's an interesting person. He's done a lot of stuff. People really value his opinion. It says here he is a 3-time #1 New York Times bestselling author. He wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F.
Oh, yeah.
As well as other titles. His books have sold around 20 million copies, translated into 65 languages, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of good stuff. Good things.
Yeah. I would think a lot of of our listeners have maybe read that book.
I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't. I think I listened to about a third or a half of the audiobook. By that far into the book, it was good.
Yeah,
it was
totally.
But by that far into the book, and with the caveat, I've read a million self-help books at this point, or at least it feels like it. By that point into the book, I was like, okay, I get it. I get the thesis here. So I didn't wind up listening to the whole thing, but it was good.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, he's the person who wrote the article that we're going to talk about today. And the article is, as we said, the 5 problems with the self-help industry, according to Mark Manson.
Yeah. And we're going to weigh in, too, on these 5 things. I'm sure we'll have lots to say about it.
No, we'll just read the article word for word and then end the episode. That should be good. Easy content for your podcast. Okay. Number one, self-help reinforces perceptions of inferiority and shame, says Mr. Manson. 2 types of people get hooked on self-help material: those who feel something is fundamentally wrong with them, and those who think they're already generally a good person, but they have problems and blind spots. Yeah, this is an interesting perspective. Self-help reinforces perceptions of inferiority and shame. I think it can. And I'm going to go ahead and guess that this is going to be a theme throughout all of these points. Self-help is an extremely broad term that encompasses a million different books, ideas, theses, beliefs, trainings, etc. So I think grain of salt on this one, but yeah, some parts of the self-help industry certainly would or could reinforce perceptions of inferiority and shame. What do you think?
Yeah, I think basically what this one's getting at is that people who are drawn to the self-help industry or self-help books or, that type of thing, they are already a bit vulnerable or can be already a little bit vulnerable. I can't speak. And, they may have an inferiority complex. They may have some guilt around, how they're feeling. They may have some shame. And so, this is a place for them to feel connected, feel like there's maybe community, feel like they can, quote unquote, like commiserate with all the other people in the community, in that self-help community. It's almost like giving them permission to stay in this feeling that they need to be helped, right? Like they need to be, there's something wrong with them. And this is a really dangerous place to be, because what happens is like you kind of get into this vicious circle of like reading all these books, and I think we've talked about this before, but never actually integrating them into your life, because you're just like, well, I'm a self-help person. Like I need help. I need to keep reading more and more and more. But, are you taking action to actually implement any of these things that you're learning? Same thing with retreats, I think we've touched on this before. It's just like it attracts these kind of vulnerable souls who are looking or maybe feeling lost or not sure. And some of these things too can create like a false hope. Like, you're going to have this huge transformation. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what comes up for me on this one.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. He goes on in this point in the article to break it down into again, he elaborates on those two kinds of people and reterms them: the people who are attempting to go from bad to okay, and the people who are attempting to go from okay to great. And he says here that the people who are attempting to go from okay to great with self-help material tend to do that. If they feel like they're already doing okay in life and they're trying to have better results and excel in life or business or whatever, they tend to do that. He was saying it's the people who are in a bad way or in bad shape, probably mentally or spiritually or whatever, who are just looking to become okay. They're the ones who can get stuck and attach shame and even resent because they don't make progress. And I could see that because self-help and self-improvement and the motivation industry is not a substitute for professional mental health, for the care of a professional mental health practitioner, for example. And treating it as such can be dangerous, right? So I think that's actually a really good point. I would agree with Mark Manson here in that regard, for sure.
Yeah, they really need to seek medical attention potentially.
Yeah.
Or the help of someone in the mental wellness space to talk them through it. Like, it's not going to be a book that's going to get them over this hump.
Yeah.
They actually need like some one-on-one support, or I don't know, different strategies.
Yeah. And it can be really tricky to know which it is, or it could be both, right?
Yeah.
A person could potentially have, and first of all, it's often a good idea to assume the best, right? While still seeking to inform ourselves and verify our assumption of the best. But a person could have something that needs to be addressed by a medical professional and could benefit from some self-help learning, right? Or it could be one or the other. The only way to know is probably to, start ruling it out and talk to your doctor basically first.
Yeah.
Make sure there's not some like a vitamin deficiency that you need to address.
Exactly.
Right? Because you're not going to do that by reading a self-help book.
No.
Right? Cool. All right. So point number 1 was self-help reinforces perceptions of inferiority and shame. I would say I disagree with that as an objective fact about self-help. I'm saying I would say subjectively, depending on the context, this could be true. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think, it can attract people who are feeling vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. And we wouldn't, and I think the danger would
that
be
vulnerability.
Yeah. I would hate to see somebody delay appropriate care because they're looking at the self-help industry or the motivation industry when they should be looking at medical or psychiatric or spiritual or something else.
Yeah, something deeper.
Whatever's appropriate, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Good awareness. I like that. I get why it's number 1 on his list here. Okay, let's go into number 2. Mm-hmm. Number 2 says self-help is often yet another form of avoidance. Mm-hmm. Yet another form of avoidance. What do you think about that, Alanna Banks?
Yeah, I mean, this really speaks to the fact that, it's kind of back to that whole point of it's okay not to be okay that we talked about, right? It's just kind of like, it's another way to avoid what you really need to address. So, I'll just read this self-help book and, miraculously I'm going to change, could be the thought that goes into seeking help in the self-help industry, but like recognizing that you have to put in the work as well. Like, yeah, you can read the book, but you also need to implement and integrate the information that you're learning and take action and take responsibility and take extreme ownership of your results and all of that stuff in order to move forward. So that's kind of like the first thing that came to mind when I read that.
Yeah. Again, this is another one. Let me read it out here again. Self-help is often yet another form of avoidance. That could be true. And here's how to inoculate, yourself, ladies, gents, and listeners, against this danger, because it can be true. This is like I'll do it when I feel ready, and I'm not going to feel ready until I learn the perfect thing, right? And I call this, I think I coined the term or I stole it without realizing it, but procrastination by education, where we keep reading the next book, taking the next course, reading the next book, going to the next training without ever executing on what we're learning.
Mm-hmm.
And the rule of thumb is, an inch of action is worth a mile of thinking and theory, right? So anytime we, do learn something, anytime we do attend a training, anytime we do read a book, the immediate question, the immediate thought must be, how can I apply this right now today?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How can I take action? And you'll learn more in taking what you've done and applying it and taking action than you will in reviewing your notes or reviewing the content or reading the next book. I promise. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So that's a good point. Self-help is often another form of avoidance, for sure. For a lot of people, I think it is.
And I think too, this is something that just came in for me was like, it's also a great way to avoid actually sitting with what is wrong, like what you're feeling, right? And, I hate to say it, but you're kind of avoiding dropping from your head into your heart in this, in number 2 here, because you're like, oh, I'll read one more self-help book and then I'll know exactly what I need to do. But what if you just sat with yourself for an hour and really listened to what's going on inside and like let that settle? Yeah. That's all the information that you need, really. You're not going to get that information from reading any books. Yeah. So, this also says to me that, you're avoiding what is actually there. You're avoiding the thing that you actually want to remedy. Yeah. And let's not do that. Yeah. Let's not. Cool. All right. That's a good one. Yeah. Number three. Self-help marketing creates unrealistic expectations. Mm-hmm. Self-help marketing. I have one objection to this list so far, and it includes every point. Mr. Manson, or whoever the author of this article is, I presume it's him, is really speaking in absolutes. Yeah. Like as if, like, point number 1 was self-help reinforces perceptions of inferiority and shame, which implies that this is always the case. And that's certainly not true. Number 2 says self-help is often yet another form of avoidance. Okay, so the word is often. The word often is in there. Okay, so fair enough. Number 3 is self-help marketing creates unreal expectations. True or false? It has to be false because it's saying 100. Every single piece of self-help marketing ever has created unreal expectations. Certainly that's not true. And Alanna, you know me, I'm a stickler for precision in language, at least as much as I can be. This is not true the way it's written. Are there people who are in self-help marketing that make outrageous and egregious claims? Certainly. And that exists in every industry. Do people overpromise and underdeliver in self-help? Sometimes? Sure they do. Is it everybody, or is it even most of the industry? I would say no, not really. No. So this is an interesting one. It's a good discussion point. But this is like what the critics, this is what the naysayers would say. And, I think it's on occasion, subjectively, sometimes it is certainly true. There's examples you could find, undoubtedly. But it's not a universal truth in the self-help world, I would say. No, absolutely it's not, because you and I know that we've worked with clients who have had transformations working with us. So if that were the case, then we wouldn't have had that. Yeah. Right? Because I don't think that the work I do is creating unrealistic expectations with the people that I work with at all. But I do love what he says here. He talks about how, this industry will promise that like everything will go away in a one weekend kind of like workshop seminar situation. And does that happen? Of course it does. Does that happen in a lot of industries? Yeah, it does. Yeah. And there are coaches out there who are kind of like hype coaches, like get you into this heightened emotional state where you're feeling amazing and, you're there for the weekend, and then you leave and you're kind of left to your own devices, and that feeling wears off. But, that makes me also say, what's wrong with that? Like, so what if you were all hyped up for a weekend and feeling amazing and like had some aha moments and then went back to your regular life? that's not to say that you're not going to shift some things in your regular life after that experience, right? Like you experienced that experience for a reason and it had an impact.
Yeah.
It will have had an impact on you no matter what. Is it transforming your life in that moment immediately? Of course not. Like that's totally unrealistic to even like think. But it does have an impact. So I don't think, that it's creating an unrealistic expectations unless you're saying, come to this weekend workshop and like your whole life is going to be transformed by Monday morning. You know what I mean? They're not saying that.
Yeah.
At all. So.
And I mean, there's a lot. This could be a whole kind of episode on its own, unrealistic expectations, but is the expectation created by the marketer, or is the expectation created in the mind of the audience and how they choose to interpret it, right? Or is it a collaboration between the two? It kind of depends on your model of the world. Is lying or deceiving the audience ever okay? No, never. No. Ever is that okay. But I mean, as a human operating on Earth, regardless of what the product is that you're evaluating, whether it's a car or a meal or a self-help training, you need to use, your critical thinking, put your critical thinking to pay on, and, ask, is it too good to be true? Right.
Yeah. Like
now,
this is where
caveat, like, there's also, I have the awareness that a person who's seeking self-help guidance could be in a more vulnerable than average state. So it is on one hand, it's a product. On the other hand, it's different than shopping for a car. And I think, as leaders in this industry, we have to take on a little extra responsibility and a little extra diligence, and a little extra integrity in honesty in marketing. So again, I disagree with the sentiment that self-help marketing universally creates unreal expectations. In fact, I'll go out and say that's not true. But are there some examples of unrealistic expectations being created in the marketing that exists out there? For sure, undoubtedly. Yeah.
And I think honestly, what this point really drives home is just, be mindful of that when you are advertising your services. And, it goes back to like, are you being ethical? And are you running an honest business? Do you have integrity? These are all really good things to keep in mind. And if you're checking all those boxes, then your marketing should be fine. If you believe in what you're selling, then you're good. But it is important to kind of keep that in mind for sure. Because as you said, people who are seeking these services are a little bit more vulnerable than some.
Not always. But
not always, no. But some people are. And some people are also looking for a magic wand.
Yeah.
Thinking like, this is going to fix me or whatever. But that's why it's so important to let your clients know right at the beginning that this is like a two-way thing, right? Like I'm the DJ, you're the dancer. I'll keep spinning the tracks if, you keep dancing, and vice versa.
Yeah. And, we were talking about this earlier this week in our mastermind call, where I made the argument that integrity is good for the sustainability and profitability of your business. It's your duty as a coach to turn away money from people who you cannot help.
Yeah.
You must not accept money from a person if you know they're not going to benefit from your service, right? This is not, selling, lemonade on the street where anybody who shows up with money, we're going to give them the lemonade because the stakes are low. This is more important than that. And you have a duty as a coach or an entrepreneur in this industry who works in integrity to, qualify your potential clients and only work with the people who you're fairly confident or totally confident you can actually help. At least that's my, and I believe your view as well. Yeah. Cool.
Next one.
Number 4. You want to read it? You read it.
Yeah. Self-help is, in brackets, usually not scientifically validated.
Finally, usually thrown in there. Self-help is usually not scientifically validated. You know,
I, I don't
I
know that
mean,
this one.
if you look at, I don't know, the top 100 self-help books of all times, I think a lot of them do, specifically mention scientific studies, specifically have bibliographies. A lot of them don't. This is kind of an interesting point, but it's also kind of like my initial response is, so what?
Yeah.
Um, does it get results?
Yeah. That's
Is
what
the
I was
bigger
going to say.
question, right? Some of the greatest shifts that can occur in a person's mind occur when they hear a story, right? Or a metaphor, or when they observe somebody else doing something that they thought was hard or challenging. I mean, these aren't necessarily scientifically validated results, but they can be some of the most profoundly important things that can help to transform a person's mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
Self-help is usually not scientifically validated. What do you think, Alanna?
I mean, I have a real problem with this because obviously I'm not poo-pooing science. Like I think that it's completely valid and it's important to have things validated by science and stuff like that. But if you're having shifts, if you're feeling better because of, I don't know, something that is not scientifically proven. And in this article, he's talking about like tarot cards and crystals and power animals and the law of attraction, tapping. I highly disagree because these things, if they're working for you, let them work for you.
Yeah.
Like, and why is it a problem? Like you said, so what? If you're seeing results, if your mood is improving, if you like are generally having a better well-being, then keep doing what you're doing. I think that's important. And I think that there is actually science to back this stuff up. And it's called the power of awareness.
Yeah.
Right? The power of awareness within some of these things that he's calling bullshit, which I think is really like
Polarizing content.
yeah, exactly. I'm getting heated. I'm getting red.
Oh,
Like it doesn't matter. If it's working, keep doing it. I
yeah.
mean, as long as you're not peeling the onion and like going into this downward spiral, like dark night of the soul, and you're more depressed, like if you're leaving these sessions feeling good, feeling uplifted, feeling empowered, and you actually want to go back for another one, then it's working.
Yeah. I mean, are you seeing results is the most important question. And I mean, see, like we're getting to the point in the article where it's just like intentionally contentious, I think, for the purpose of stirring views and conversation potentially, and I can't blame the author for that, right?
I mean,
But
he also mentions in here NLP and hypnotherapy.
yeah, where he says the science is hit or
Hit or
miss.
miss.
And fair enough. I mean, it kind of depends how it's applied, right? I think the key point here is sometimes, what I've observed in the self-help or the coaching industry is people purporting that something is scientifically founded when that's questionable, right? That's something that I see. This is back, this sentence backed by science, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which can be interpreted a million different ways. I mean, when people try to use that as a selling point, I mean, sometimes that gets out of integrity quickly, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, with that, excluding times when people use the term science or whatever as a deceptive marketing ploy, which again is not often, but I have seen it. Results speak louder than anything else when it comes to the self-help and coaching industry. Yeah, let's talk about what's one of the most crystals, right? Is here not scientifically founded, but are there people who get great relief, great results, and improve their quality of life because they purchased and or used crystals in a certain way? By the way, I'm not one of those people, but am I going to tell people your results are not valid, your relief is not valid, your healing is not valid, your life is not valid because there's no, somebody's specific definition of scientific proof that this is working for you? Of course not. That would be horrible.
Yeah.
To do. Now, on the flip side, am I going to, twist somebody's arm and say, you must use crystals? But, no, of course not. Right. To
Yeah,
each their own,
exactly. You find what works for you. And I would argue, if we're going to talk about crystals for a second, are crystals not just an anchor, which
Yeah.
has been like scientifically proven?
Yeah.
So
Then it can be, connected to the research done by Pavlov. And that's true. That's a good point. That's a really good, that's the topic for another day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep doing you, keep buying your crystals if that's makes you feel good.
Yeah. Cool. I love it. Oh, Alanna's so mad. Passionate. So passionate. Okay, last one on the list. Number 5, self-help is a contradiction. I think I probably need to read a little bit more for this one to make sense, because that's quite a vague statement. The contradiction of self-help, according to Mark Manson, is that the first and most fundamental step to growth is to admit that you're okay as you are, and that you don't necessarily need anyone else's help. It's the prime belief, and by its very definition, it's something that can't be given to you by someone else. It must be reached on your own. Okay. He continues, the irony is that once you do accept that you don't need someone else's help or advice to become a good person, that's an interesting term, good person, he's selected here, it's only then that their advice truly becomes useful to you. Okay, so self-help is a contradiction in that he's arguing that the contradiction of self-help is that the first and most fundamental step to growth is to admit you're okay. Okay, so my problem right off the bat is, says who? Who says that the first and most fundamental step to growth is to admit you're okay? I mean, for a lot of people, maybe that's a thing. I can't recall any specific self-help guru standing on stage and saying the first and most fundamental step to growth is to admit you're okay. I don't even necessarily disagree with that. I just don't know why that's like the hub on which his theory that self-help is a contradiction stands. I mean, there's a lot more.
Well, he's also saying here that, the bottom line is like, you've got to figure it out yourself. This is your life. You can't expect anybody to tell you how to live your life or what to do or be happy for you or anything like that. Okay, fair enough. Of course not. But can you have someone mentor you, someone guide you who's already been through what you're going through, to help you kind of like overcome some challenges? And I know you and I do this as part of our work, but we never tell people what to do. We're not like in the business of giving advice, but we guide clients to come up with their own answers.
Yeah.
At least that's what I do. I ask powerful questions to get people to get to the awareness, that realization, like, oh yeah, like I've never thought of it from that perspective. I've never realized that that was actually a problem that I've been harboring for all of these years. So as a coach or, someone who works in the self-help industry, I'm not telling you to do anything. And I certainly am not telling my clients, well, if I'm happy for you, then you should be happy for you too. I'm getting them to come at it from their own realization, from their own awareness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's that. And I think you're right. But also, I mean, there is a slight distinction to be made between self-help and coaching, right?
True. Yeah.
Because self-help, some would argue, is not the same as coaching, right? Because coaching is external help. I think in this point, Mark Manson is literally arguing semantics. He's saying that self-help is a contradiction. If you're doing something for yourself, you're not being helped. And I would say, who cares?
Well, can't you help yourself?
Let's say, well, he's arguing that I guess you can't. And looking at the definition of the word help and the word self and all this, and I'm very rapidly approaching the point where I would say, not only does this not matter, this does not reflect the title of the article, 5 Problems with the Self-Help Industry. Is self-help is a contradiction, a problem with the self-help industry? Again, do people get positive results when they invest in self-help material? Very often they do, especially if they're, as he pointed out in point number one, if they're one of those people who's looking to go from overall okay to get better, rather than one of those people who's having significant problems and is looking for, a more serious healing, they're going to get results, right? So, I mean, fair enough. I like Mark Manson. And again, I think the bigger contradiction, he says self-help is the contradiction. He also says, figure it out yourself. Well, Mark Manson, you made how many hundreds of thousands or potentially millions of dollars as an author of multiple self-improvement books? So which is it? Is it read your books, or is it figure it out yourself, which is a direct quote from Mark Manson in this article, right? Interesting, is it not?
Interesting, yeah. And but then that makes me ask, well, how do I figure it out myself? Do I just sit and drop from my head into my heart and get grounded in my knowing, and then I'm going to figure it all out?
Definitely that. But
you need resources to get there. If you're not there yet, when I say that, I know with 100% certainty what I need to do that. But I've also been studying this material for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. But if someone had said to me 10 years ago, just drop from your head into your heart and get grounded in your knowing, I would be like, say what?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means. So, I mean, hold up. I think you can figure it out on your own, right? But you need to follow the breadcrumbs to get there.
Yeah.
And those breadcrumbs are self-help books.
Yeah.
They are YouTube videos, self-help YouTube videos. They're people that you talk to. Then it's investing in these woo-woo things that he's saying don't work, potentially. Yeah. And then, when you're really getting serious, and this is for me, when I started to get really serious, that's when I invested in a coach.
Yeah.
Right. And that was my journey. That's unique to me. That was my experience. Some other people may be out there and they just go all in on a coach right off the bat as a total beginner. I have no idea. It's a total unique experience, unique process of figuring it out on your own.
Yeah. To his credit, he finishes the article saying, be skeptical, be selfish, be ruthless. This is your life we're talking about. Nobody else can be happy for you. I agree with all of that. If you find yourself having that expectation, well, that's your problem. Okay, fair enough. I mean, I think that the spirit here in the very last few paragraphs is think critically, right? But to your point about self-improvement, should we learn from what others who have been successful before us have done, especially those who are willing to share in books and courses and coaching? Absolutely. Should we be ready and seeking to innovate and take what others have done and make it even better and add our own personality, our own flair, our own life experience? Yes, we really should. The self-help industry is not about taking other people's teaching and repeating them verbatim in its sequence of events that becomes your life unfolding, but it's rather learning so that you can save time, so you don't have to first of all repeat the mistakes of others who have come before you, and you can learn from what they've done and then add to it, right? Nobody takes training, nobody invests in self-help, nobody dives into coaching so that they could get the exact same results that everybody else has always gotten. They want to get their best results. That's the point. And I think that's what I've got for this list. Yeah.
And I think too, the self-help industry, I feel like I'm making this up right now, but I feel like it's still in its infancy. Would you agree?
Relative to most industries, yes. Although self-help has been around, it exploded in the 60s and 70s. Right? Yeah. So it's been around, a good amount of time, but compared to I don't know, the agriculture industry, it's super.
So I feel like the best is yet to come within this industry. Yes, there are amazing people here in this space doing amazing things, but I mean, there's going to be a lot more interesting things coming up, and within this industry, we're not at the end, we're just at the beginning. So that's kind of my final point.
There you go. Cool. I love it. All right. So this is a good. If you want to read the article, by the way, just Google 5 problems with the self-help industry, Mark Manson, and I'm sure it'll come up. Thanks to Mark Manson for publishing this for us to look through and chat about.
Yeah, great discussion.
Great discussion. Yeah. And yeah, cool. So what do you got going on, Alanna Banks?
What do I have going on? Well, I've got my very first HypnoFlow class coming up on January 15th.
Cool.
So that's happening in Toronto, in person at Downward Dog Yoga, which is at 30 Ossington Avenue. Tickets are $33. You can buy them through my Instagram or send me a message at Alanna Banks Coaching. So that's kind of like my big thing right now that I've got going on. And then I'm also taking on clients for my sexual freedom hypnosis program as well. So you can follow more information on that on Instagram at Love Conduit, or you can go to my website, alannabanks.com.
Sweet. Love it. Cool.
What do you have going on?
I've always got something in the works, something cooking. My book is out, the One Sentence Coaching Course by Ryan Montes. It's on Amazon. Follow me on Instagram at Ryan Montes NLP. I have lots of fun reels that I've put out lately, so please go watch them. And ryanmontes.com. I've got some new stuff in the works for the new year, and I've got a new bunch of products I'm going to be rolling out. So more to come on that. But for now, yeah, that's it.
Cool. And also remember to follow us on Instagram at It's the No Excuses Podcast.
Yeah, do it. Cool.
Okay. Well, that's it.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye, everyone.